Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Ariel Property Advisors, Sterling National Bank, Capital One Bank, Collins Building Services, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, Amerant Bank, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, B6 Real Estate Advisors, Briarwood Organization, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Commercial Mortgage, Citizens Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handler Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Matone Group, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Services, SJP Properties, Stonehenge NYC, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Meringor Family Foundation, and these friends. What is this thing called opportunity zones? It's, you pick up the newspaper about a couple of weeks ago, the New York Times had a 4-page expose on this, the greatest thing to happen in the real estate world for years, best investment around. I'm not certain. So today, on an update on opportunity zones, with the help of my friend Abe, I brought together a group of individuals who truly understand the topic of opportunity zones. And we're going to get a little into the intricacies and who should have it and who should invest. My guests include Dan Flanagan, who's the office managing partner with Passanelli, Richard Richmond, who is the chairman and CEO of the Richmond Group. Last but not least, I will call my executive producer, since he brought Richard over there, Abe Schlissenfeld, who's the co-head of the real estate practice for Marks Paneth. So I have the Wizard of Oz, an attorney over here. I have an actual individual who makes investments in opportunity zones. And I have the counselor over here, the other counselor, who's the accountant professional over there. So after a year of this hype, how many people have gone into this business? Because the only one I know who's in the business is Richard. So what's really going? Who's really doing things?
So first let me correct you. It's been 18 months of a lot of talk about opportunity zones. Right. But what's really exciting now is, as opposed to a year ago, before that it was just talk and the whole world was talking about it. All the executives were telling all their people, we got to know more about it, we got to learn more about it. What you find now is people such as Richard Richmond and others that really know the business and are really serious about it. Those are the ones that are actually doing opportunity zone deals. And there aren't as many deals as the world was talking about a year ago and 6 months ago, but the ones that are doing the deals are really serious and great deals.
Dan, we were talking in the green room, your clients and your people, that who's doing the deals and where are they doing the deals? I mean, there are 8,700 opportunity zones around the country which was created. Where are the deals? Where do you see, because you're a national practice?
Yeah, and I'm sure it depends on where you are. And who you're seeing and who you're representing. We represent mostly developers. We are national, so we've done deals in Salt Lake City, Scottsdale, Canton, Ohio, around the NFL Hall of Fame, Cleveland, just Indianapolis, Kansas City, St. Louis, all over the place, really. Not much in New York, which to me is interesting. I don't see much.
So
happening.
Here we have an individual who's been operating in business, celebrating his 31st anniversary. Over here, who's truly involved with opportunity zones in a variety of places, but directly on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue. Let's talk about that property, why you went to an opportunity zone when you could have done it in a variety of other structures.
Well, first of all, a number of the properties we didn't know when we started the process. And particularly, you're doing a project in New York City with the city of New York. It takes planning and work years in advance. So we've actually closed, and we are under construction on 3 different opportunity zone projects. One is on 125th Street in New York, one is in North Hollywood, California, and one is in St. Petersburg, Florida.
So somebody might say, these are supposed to be for areas that need business to grow. North Hollywood, California, New York City over here, and where was and St. Petersburg?
And St. Petersburg.
Okay, these are vibrant communities. They're business over there. Are they truly an opportunity
Well,
zone?
all these areas, I would say, have been in transition. And when you work in development today in the United States, it's tougher in some places than others. It takes years to, when you first see the property and decide you're going to develop on it, to actually get all the approvals and start construction. So it would be almost impossible today for someone to have started construction on a project that didn't have some activity going on prior to the key date, which was January 1, 2018. Because if you acquired the property before that, chances are it's technical, you might not be able to do it as an opportunity zone. So we were working on all these projects well in advance of the change in the law. But in each of the cases, they were transitional areas because, as I understand the law, it's based on census tracts that are low income in the states. And the governor gets to pick, I think it's approximately 25% of those eligible census tracts to be opportunity zones. So these were transitional areas that if you had gone to years before, you would look at it a little differently than maybe today.
Let's briefly go over the benefits of the opportunity zone, you and Abe, to talk about it.
It's a very high level because most people are probably aware of it, but essentially, and we're not going to get into a lot of the technicalities,
No.
but essentially if you have a capital gain and within 180 days you invest it in an opportunity zone, you don't pay tax currently, at least for federal and virtually all states.
Wait, virtually all states. What about New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut?
In the tri-state area, they've all complied with opportunity zone rules and regulations, and you get the benefits.
But not California.
Not California, which is, yes, a
And
13
New York
plus.
so far, right?
So far, there's been a lot of
Some
talk about them not complying, but as of today, New York complies. So you don't pay tax currently. Then
You postpone your tax.
you defer it. Yes, you defer your
it.
tax. In 2026, you'll pay tax on 85% of your gain. This rule's 5 years, 7 years, but essentially in 2026, you're going to pay tax on 85% of your gain. But the real home run and the real sweetener of the pot here is that any appreciation from the day of your investment, i.e. today, until whenever you sell the property, so long as you hold it for 10 years, there's zero tax. That's really what the big deal about opportunity zones is.
Is that the reason that you went into the opportunity zones?
No, what I was getting to was that we found out that in the case of these 3 projects, that they got the designation after we were already starting on the projects. They're a help because when you're developing in these kinds of areas, the capital budget you have gets affected by the opportunity zone. So in the case of 125th Street, it was an important factor in analyzing the transaction. What happens is...
But you were going into the transaction because you felt it was a worthwhile transaction.
Yes.
You weren't doing this as a developer, who's just trying to get fees or other things. You were over there because you said, this is a viable project. It's a mixed-use project. with residential, retail, and so on, and community facility space.
That's true, but when you're working with the city of New York on property they control, the first thing you do with the city agencies is discuss with the city what they want to see on the site. And then as you get close to starting the project, for instance, how many units are going to be very low income? How many are going to be moderate income? How many units might be market rate? What you're going to do with your retail space. So for instance, when you put together all your numbers and you look at your construction costs and you see what the rents are going to be, the city then will negotiate with you what they think is a fair return to start out. And then there are adjustments made. So for instance, we originally, I don't believe, had designated any of the low-income units as being for homeless population. And I think we ended up with like 28. And then the number of units that were going to be at certain rents
Right, on the different AMIs.
are decided. So when you have the opportunity zone, it affects what kind of return you might be looking for and that you'll be negotiating with the city, and what kind of financing and subsidies you might get from the city. So it does have an impact.
Dan, your developers, most of them are not I mean, the Richmond Group is a luxury, you know, they develop in 49 apartments in 49 states. Your clients over there, were they trying to do these deals in affordable housing, or were they looking in other areas? Okay, because you can build a hotel in an opportunity zone. You can operate an operating business in an opportunity zone. Where have your clients or advice has been?
Mainly traditional real estate plays very much like Mr. Richmond's, but on a smaller scale, and deals that were already in process. And that shouldn't surprise us. How long does it take to get any real estate project done? So we shouldn't be surprised that the race has gone to the swift, the strong, and the people already there at this point.
Okay, we were talking in the green room with regard to, you know, a number of the brokerage firms, Morgan Stanley, you know, Alliance Bernstein, Goldman Sachs, Cadre. I mean, today prior to the show, I went on Google and I put the word opportunity zones. I probably saw 30 ads from different companies trying to say, we're in the opportunity zone business. The question is, it's not for everyone, and it's not for every investor, okay? Because the investors, it's illiquid. That people don't realize that there's illiquidity over there. You wear two roles. You represent the Richmond Group on one side, but you also represent high net worth individuals. What do you say to the high net worth individual when they say to you, no, I've heard this interesting product called this opportunity zone. What do you recommend, Abe?
So there's a few things I remind them of, just to be the cautious accountant. And, you know, as I mentioned before, in 2026, the tax is due. Now, you're not going to be exiting from that property until at least 10 years from now. So if you're going into it, you need to make sure that you can have liquidity in 2026 in order to pay the taxes. I also remind everyone, and as we were discussing in the green room, and Richard brought up very appropriately, is that the tax that you're going to pay in 2026 is at whatever rates are in effect during that time.
And as Richard brought up, who knows what's going to happen, you know, there's change of administration with what capital gains taxes could be.
Right. So tax rates go up 5, 7, 8%. A lot of the benefit that we're getting from it may be evaporated. So, you know, you have to go into it. I warn everyone all the time also, make sure you're going in with a reputable developer. Take someone like the Richmond Group and other reputable developers that are out there that have been doing this for a long time. That's, you know, more likely to be a good investment than the 30 people that are showing up on Google searches now and are opening up shop in the last 12 months.
I mean, when you're focusing to your client, okay, and the joke about calling you the Wizard of Oz.
Self-declared.
Self-declared. You've done a lot of time. You went to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is an opportunity zone. You've looked around the city for opportunity zones. What's the focus of the investors today? Are they trying to be in the real estate business, or are they trying to be in the operating business?
mostly real estate. I was just in a fascinating place out in Provo, Utah last week, the Hall Labs, which is a traditional, been around a long time. They invented artificial diamonds in the 50s, an accelerator, an incubator, and an opportunity zone was placed right on top of them. And so they're trying to use that for what essentially venture capital investing. But there's not much of that. The regs didn't even get it anywhere close till
I'm
April.
going to now give you a different idea. One opportunity zone business could be the medical marijuana business.
Or recreational.
Or the recreational, depending on the state. So the sin business, if I remember the rules, on the sin business, there is a 29% tax on the gross revenues. Okay, I did a show on this topic. That's why I know about it.
So Steve Mnuchin commented, I forget the exact day, but it was either April or May at a hearing in Washington, that the intent was for marijuana businesses not to be eligible for the opportunity zone benefits.
But the courts are going to decide that.
We'll see what happens. It wasn't listed as a sin business because it's currently federal illegal, but we'll see what happens. It's definitely, I mean, putting opportunity zones aside, no pun intended, it's a growing business.
Backing up your point, it is a 10-year investment. If you need liquidity before that period of time, it's probably not a great investment. The second thing I've said to people, we've done an analysis to see what's the real benefit on real transactions of this tax deferral and not capital gain. And we think it's probably about 250 or 300 basis points tax-free better. So really what people should do is not just look at an opportunity zone investment saying, oh, I can save taxes. They should say, what's the alternative investments they might want to put their money in, and say, does this differential that you get from the opportunity zone investment throw it into the higher category that you want to do it?
And you also have to remember the liquidity situation that we spoke about.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to add on one other thing we were discussing about the opportunity zone businesses, and one of the reasons why they haven't been as popular as the properties is because one of the many intricacies and complexities of the law that they put in is that on every year you're paying tax on your income. The only real benefit for the opportunity zones is when you actually sell the business or the property after 10 years. Now, we all know that real estate is a lot easier to actually sell than a lot of operating businesses that just aren't.
Okay, but
your fantasy is you start Microsoft, a lot of complications, and sell it in 10 plus years.
Real estate is tried and tested that you can sell it.
Yeah.
right, but
There is one change in the interpretation of the rules. All of us who have been operating in this area have become very interested in the IRS regulations, and they've taken a couple stabs at it. There's been a change, and I think Abe can back me up or correct me on this. Originally, there was a real question. If you have operating income in an opportunity zone before the 10 years, can you distribute that? Then there was, and I think most people felt yes.
and that was approved, right?
Okay, then the question became, if you return capital because you refinanced the property and you don't sell it, is that okay because you don't really have a capital gains? And initially, people were rather hesitant to say that was okay. But I think it has migrated the view that now, if you have a real estate project and you have a construction loan, and then you take out your construction loan with permanent financing, and you have sufficient proceeds to return some capital, that is okay,
So
even though you didn't sell the property, because you didn't sell the property.
So the return on investment, is it taxable?
No,
I mean, it's a refinance.
it's a refinancing. Again,
which
there's
should
still
change which should change your basis in the transaction.
It's complicated. Generally, yes, you're right. You're allowed to refinance.
Right,
there are
but
certain
I
rules
think that's what
surrounding
made it interesting to people, because you were able to, the refinancing change. Okay, some of the other nuances that would change from the April legislation, you know, the different interpretations. So what happens if there's a next interpretation over there, Abe? What happens to the laws?
hopefully they'll be as taxpayer friendly as the first two rounds of regulations. If they're not, then it's not so much the regulations that people are concerned about, because regulations theoretically are only to clarify the original law. The issue is if there's a change in Washington, a change of heart as to what went on with the Opportunity Zone program. Who knows what will happen?
Not every piece of real estate is liquid. Everything might sell. It's a question of selling at a certain price. Okay, I still remember 2008, 2009, hotels were doing okay, and then the recession came in, the hotel business went in the dumps. Okay, and I remember some banks that I had been working with, and they liked the hotel business. And they lent money to a very good operator, but the operator said, I can't afford to pay. What happens over there if there's a total loss? We're talking about the gains. What about the loss? What happens if you don't have that profitability that you were talking about, or you projected? Because projections are projections.
So the government actually decided to partner up with the American business community when it came to the Opportunity Zones. And what I mean by that is that, we've been talking about 85% of the tax you pay in 2026. That's assuming that the value is equal or higher than the current value. If the value goes down, they've put a collar in, and you can use the lower valuation amount in 2026 for your starting point of how much tax you pay. I've been advising people to open up valuation companies in 2026.
There's a liquidity possibility if you refinance, okay? If you get a permanent mortgage. Who knows what the rates are? People like Richard and I still remember, and Dan, I'm going to put you in over there, when prime was 18%. Okay, my crystal apple is not crystal, to telling the truth. We don't really have ideas on what's going to happen. There are certain people who believe that, as I alluded with the ads on Google, that they are gurus or involved with opportunity zones, and I think you have to have a nuance of remember who you're dealing with.
Well, the liquidity issue is a big issue, and the value of liquidity today is quite exceptional. The best example I always use, every week I follow 6 REIT stocks in Barron's, and I look at the yields. And if you want liquidity and own real estate, a REIT is the best place to have liquidity in real estate because you get a dividend, it's taxable, but today, if you want to sell your position,
you can trade
it takes you 30 seconds on your computer with your Schwab or Fidelity account. So the value of investing with liquidity is that you pay, probably today it's about 2.75, you get 2.75% return in the dividend, which is totally taxable, and then you hope that the stock goes up in value.
Right, the appreciation level.
Okay, now, no one I know will invest in a private transaction in real estate for that kind of return. First of all, the advantage of investing in a private transaction is the tax benefits of owning real estate flow through to the owners. So most of your cash flow is probably going to have tax shelter and a deferral of those taxes probably till you sell. And the return that people want, I know the institutions, like in our luxury product,
right,
institutions tend to look for about a 14% plus or minus return compared to owning REIT stock. So that, to me, is part of the premium between having an illiquid investment and a liquid investment.
Wow.
What happens in many cases for people in the real estate business, they make an investment and there's a need for a capital call. What's the position of now you have to put more money in? The initial money was made by your capital gains when you sold the stock. Now you're putting additional capital. What's the tax ramifications of that, Abe?
Well, there's no quote-unquote ramifications, but it's not I'll call an eligible investment, and you won't get the benefits if you
have two
invest in
accounts,
future years.
basically.
So you have two accounts.
And
But very few people have brought that up in their discussions and explaining opportunities.
A lot of the funds.
I'm not saying this, I'm saying
a lot of the big funds that you met, the big brokerage houses, when they initially were setting up these opportunity zone funds, that was the mistake they made. They were setting these up like all their other funds with 3-4 year capital calls, until the investors started pointing out to them, like, I have a one-time gain, I want the benefits now. Don't come to me in 2-3 years from now for money.
Our philosophy, not to be an advertisement, our philosophy has always been that we never have capital calls, mandatory capital calls of our investors. In the history of our company, we've never had one.
because you've always raised a sufficient amount up front.
Or we say, for instance, give you an example, the opportunity fund we just closed in North Hollywood. If there's a need for more capital, we'll put it in. You can invest knowing that you can never be held liable for a capital
Which
call.
I think is very important, because the biggest problem that people fail to remember is, I know people have invested in apartment buildings in New York City. Before the rent rules changed, now those apartments there's illiquidity and there's additional capital calls, so there are certain ramifications. So I think even if we came back 6 months from now, we'd still have big questions of what's happening. There'll be more people at that time investing in opportunity zones. Certainly the tax ramifications will change, but it is a topic for discussion that you should speak to your accountants, your lawyers, and developers. And I'd like to thank Dan, Richard, and Abe, and I'll see you next week.